now we're heading into our late afternoon here in Central European time. Coming up now to our second topic section, we are heading into the field of water utilities in smart cities. And of course, we're starting again with two inputs. And I'd like to introduce you to our first speaker. He is the CEO of Berlin Center of Competence for Water, and he's an acknowledged expert in sustainable urban development and digitalization. With us is Professor Jochen Rabe. A warm welcome to you, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, let me check. Do you see the right screen, the presentation?
I do see a photo which asks if this is really a smart city we are in. It's a good question and a good photo.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to kick off this session. And speaking of kicks, I've decided it's a late afternoon, it's the second session, so I thought maybe I'd give us all a little bit of a kick. Because, well, I decided to call this little input, water utilities and smart cities, well, are they in? And so far we heard lots about smart water, and of course the title of today is Smart Water for Resilient Cities. And of course the second session is about, well, how is that smart water fitting into cities, and how is resilience coming into play? And I think that's where I decided to pose a few overarching questions and to poke us a little bit, maybe to pick it up in the delightful presentations coming shortly afterwards. So I decided, well, to get maybe a few things out of the way, or to actually put it on the table. And that's essentially also my agenda of today's little input. First of all, I think the smart city is not about technology. We heard about great technology, but I think it's not about technology. Resilience is not sustainability. I'll come to that in a second. The smart city will not be built. And I think the water sector so far hardly features in, let alone drives the smart city debate. And of course, that's where it's fantastic that this today's event is trying to do just that. But I think there's a lot more to be done. So what do I mean by the smart city is not about technology? Of course, we already heard and saw amazing technology, and it's enabling us to do fantastic things, but it's still not about technology. It is about these things. It is about rapid change that's happening to us. On the left-hand side, you see a few diagrams from the so-called Great Acceleration. And on the right-hand side, you see, of course, the Sustainable Development Goals. So we have change which is happening to us at unprecedented paces. And of course, we also need that. And I think that's too often forgotten when it comes to thinking about smart cities and the infrastructure in it. Now, resilience is not sustainability. Why is that important to say? Because it's always used in one sentence without essentially making a difference. What is what? And sometimes I get the question, is resilience the new sustainability? No, it's not. And this is one of the graphs which is, I think, most convincingly showing sort of the relationship of it. And I think this is important when it comes to understanding how we use tech to actually come to higher levels of sustainability. Sustainability is a normative concept, and resilience is sort of the ability to change towards this. So you can see that in this little paragraph, this orange shape around this transformation trajectory. And you already heard about our project SEMA. And of course, you will hear in a second about our project Digital Water City, which I both believe are widening the curve sort of the resilient resilience space to actually head in the right direction. But there are also circumstances where resilience is actually the opposite of sustainability. So that needs to be kept in mind. I think when you look at this paper, which is called the 23 Unresolved Problems in Hydrology, very worth reading. It's coming out with all these questions. Just looking at the headlines on the left-hand side, it's all about change. It's all about change and how to operate together, how to integrate the water sector with other phenomena or concepts like space or humans, etc., etc. And there's still a lot to be done from each sector. So the smart city will not be built. Well, we already saw quite a few of hard infrastructure. What I mean by that is, of course, it will be the city of the future will still be physical and not virtual. However, it will not be built because the digital revolution is just happening way too fast than we can sort of build cities for digital systems. So in other words, we have to turn it around. It's all about essentially operating the existing. And you can see two photographs here. On the left is the original, which is a great photograph by Ed Rucher, sort of hopping in a helicopter looking at LA from the top. And you can see from the oil spills, and these days the cars still had severe oil spills, how the space is used. And the difference, I think, in the smart city is that we do understand these spare capacities, which are marked on the right-hand side, essentially, and we can utilize and operate these these capacities. And I think this is the key change we will see in the smart city, also in smart water systems. So I maybe slightly provocatively, I said the water sector isn't quite in the smart city debate yet. Why is that the case? I don't know, let's discuss. I haven't quite worked it out yet. I think it's still about the disconnect of sort of the natural environment disciplines or researching disciplines and the built environment disciplines. And of course, it's always easier to look at the existing infrastructure, how to sort of improve it. I saw in the very first Slido sort of poll, efficiency, I think, was the biggest one in the middle, and that's of course right. But I think to achieve the goals I was introducing earlier, we need to connect these two much more in a much more integrated way. So this divide, I think, is still there. And I think, of course, I would say that I have a planning background. I think the integrated planning of the two is crucial to unlock the opportunities in there. And that's, I think, where we move towards a whole water cycle management. This wasn't possible so far it wasn't possible. I really got into green-blue infrastructure 15 years ago, and we are talking about a lot. But the understanding, or the idea of understanding the system in sufficient high resolution and maybe move towards sort of not just understanding it, but also operating it is just a recent thing. But of course, it comes with huge issues of how we want to connect the disciplines, the governance systems, and of course also the technologies involved. I also was asked to give you a very, very brief insight into sort of what is happening in Berlin. Berlin recently won the Model Project Smart City call from the Federal Ministry of Internal Affairs, Buildings and Communities. It's an 850 million program sort of pushing German municipalities towards a smart city. Here's proof that I think we need, as the water sector, need to push a lot harder to be part of it, because the way it works is the municipalities have to do a smart city strategy and then 5 implementation projects. So far we have, I think, 45 municipalities with each 5 implementation projects. And out of these 45 times 5 projects, there's 1 water project. Just 1. And that's the one we wrote into it, because I had the pleasure to be part of the proposal writing team in Berlin. So what is it? Well, we have to come back next year, but it's essentially trying to sort of what I was starting to to call for here is it will try to make the green-blue infrastructure plus the gray infrastructure below that via the means of digital systems and tools more available for planning. So far, for example, we have in Berlin, we have a 1,000 green roof program. That's fantastic that we have that. But essentially, speaking of speed, speaking of resilience, I think we need to find systems where we can establish where do we need these 1,000 roofs in the right places to have the maximum impact. The green-blue infrastructure part, sort of that's previously always was sort of the blue side of the smart city, isn't happening fast enough. And I think I squeezed in also here the 5 different main strategy of resilience reserves, autonomous subsystems, feedback loops, fire breaks, and device input is something we will look at. And I recommend sort of for each projects we look at, so maybe to reflect on sort of how is that responding to these resilience strategies. To really make one step forward. And what we will achieve, and this I'm coming to an end in a second, is hopefully something like this. We always knew that there are benefits of sort of merging the water systems with the urban environment. But to communicate it and to provide evidence was actually quite hard. And that also makes it quite hard to, for example, ensure it or to convince politics or all the necessary stakeholders to fully rely on these systems. I think the digital in there can make a real difference and can actually knit it together and substantiate this evidence we need. Hang on, there you go. So last slide, what do we need to take away? I think we need to understand the system of sort of a relationship about sustainability, resilience, and transformation much better in all we do. As usual, we have to establish both the value and the cost of resilience. To actually fund resilience is difficult because as you said, one of the key strategies is provide reserves. It's always very difficult to convince stakeholders to say, let's invest in something which we might need at some point and not just now. So we need to make it a lot more tangible. We need to establish KPIs, so also how these systems and how this is delivering against the goals I introduced earlier. And I think the digital, as mentioned several times in this very short input, is our game changer. It's where we can sort of do the quantum leaps we need for this. And with this, I end, and I'm looking very much forward to the next presentations and also to share one of the breakout sessions about governance, which I think is one of the key bottlenecks to crack. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Jochen Rabe. Thanks for joining us today, the CEO of Berlin Center of Competence for Water. So thanks again for joining us and stay with us for the rest of the afternoon.